vessel was just about nearing his end. He had been incredibly useful. An entire continent devastated, close to 60 million dead and counting, the world in flames. Destruction as far as the eye could see. But alas, he was now a drug-addicted physical wreck of a man. It was now time to move on. He was possessed by the spirit of Wotan, the Germanic god of war, trickery, and death. His armies, that not so long ago held sway over an entire continent, was now reduced to a smattering of old men and young boys. His engine of destruction, now known to history as Nazi Germany, was fast running out of territory, people to kill and lives to destroy. It was now obliged to feed on its own people, killing so-called traitors and deserters. Anybody it could get its hands on. Its final victims, the self-proclaimed master race, discovered to their horror that they were more or less in the same boat as the subhumans they had not so long ago despised, conquered, and enslaved. They had discovered rather late in the day that they too were simply meat for the grinder. Wotan, the dominant spirit behind this whirlwind of destruction, was himself, of course, not real, not in the strictest sense. He was, in fact, an egregore, a personality like all other false gods constructed by Satan and his kingdom of darkness for use as a vehicle. A vehicle in which the demonic hosts, ranging from either Lucifer himself or any of a variety of lesser spirits, would use to manipulate and control the people. In short, Wotan, like the false gods of all the other nations, Marduk, Baal, Zeus, Shiva, etc., was really nothing but a cheap suit used by the demons in their efforts to control mankind. But what a cheap suit he has been. After a long hiatus of several centuries, a time in which he and the other pagan gods were driven underground by Christianity, the spirit of Wotan, after subtle manipulations, had triumphantly returned, and in the course of a few generations successfully reconverted the German nation, and as time would later reveal, the whole of Europe back to the evils of paganism. The return to paganism and the nullification of Christianity in Europe was a slow but ingeniously subtle affair. It bore all the hallmarks of Lucifer, the master of deception and father of lies. It was a methodical and relentless display of the power and influence of his kingdom of darkness, both in its continuing war against a humanity held captive and its war against the Creator God himself. Long ago, in eons past, the archangel Lucifer, together with 1/3 of the angelic host, rebelled against their Creator and God. They were soundly defeated and unceremoniously sent packing back down to earth, the starting point of the said rebellion. Here they are confined until the day of judgment. Unable to attack, much less defeat, their Creator God, they instead resorted to destroying his magnificent creation, turning the beautiful and pristine planet Earth into a landscape of darkness, desolation, and utter destruction. But then, around 6,000 years ago, God proclaimed, "Let there be light," and that era of desolation was brought to an end. He then began the process of renewing the earth in 6 memorable days. On the 6th day, he created man. God created man in his image and likeness, giving him dominion over the earth. Mankind, made physical beings, were created in the image of God and had within them the potential of eventually becoming actual children of God, inheriting his perfect mind and character. God's plan is to reproduce himself through the family of mankind, and thus he gave man as his primary mission to be fruitful and multiply. Man, he decreed, would replace Satan and his angels in their dominion of the earth, and eventually, when they have developed his perfect character, would share with him in the dominion of the universe as part of his family. Lucifer and his legions, naturally resentful of this divine plan, decided to undermine God's will by subverting and corrupting mankind, whom they regarded as little more than animals. Man was subsequently tempted into sin by Satan, falling under his dominion and control, a control exercised by the devil and his angels over the whole world. Under this kingdom's rule, death, suffering, misery, and destruction is the order of the day. Through their influence over human minds, the ruling demons encourage mankind to engage in the most extreme manner of lawlessness and depravity. The purposes are twofold. Firstly, it hastens mankind along the path to self-destruction, and secondly, they seek to grieve God in his very spirit. At one point, the demonic realm had so utterly corrupted humanity that it actually made God regret that he had created man on the earth. Under demonic management, the earth was filled with violence and utterly corrupt. Demons were mixing with humans, creating demonic hybrids, their aim being to thoroughly corrupt the human gene pool so as to prevent any future salvation. God, in his mercy and love for mankind, was compelled to send a worldwide flood and wipe clean the slate of that evil human civilization. He determined that humanity would start afresh with the one remaining family of Noah, whose genealogy was free of demonic contamination. To prevent a reoccurrence of a completely demonized world, or at the very least, hinder the devil's capacity to completely dominate the minds of a more or less defenseless mankind, God, in his mercy, divided the family of man into nations after the flood. This he did by confusing their language. By hindering communication between groups of peoples, he reduced the likelihood that the nations would be of one mind, a mind easily manipulated by Satan. By allowing division and separation, God allowed mankind to develop different perspectives under varying conditions. Man would have a breathing space to seek God. The division of man created an obstacle for Lucifer, an obstacle that he and his demonic cohorts have constantly been eroding throughout the course of history. Never one to shrink from a challenge, he would subsequently organize his kingdom into a system whereby all the nations are assigned demonic princes to rule over them. These demonic princes and the hordes below them adapt themselves to the geography, conditions, tastes, and experiences of the native populations, creating a system of false gods and false religious practices to keep them in a state of darkness and confusion. The Germanic tribes, being part of the human diaspora, were subject, like all the other nations, to this form of satanic rule. Here, Satan created, as everywhere else, a pantheon of false gods based primarily on the natural inclinations of men to war, indulge their lustful vices, and develop various superstitions based on ignorance, the fear of death, and the worship of the forces of nature. In the case of the Germans, the pantheon consisted first and foremost of the chief god Wotan, father of the gods. He was the god of war, death, wisdom, and poetry. Among his other more notable qualities was him being referred to as the possessor or leader of the possessed. This is perhaps an obscure reference to the frenzied behavior of his warriors in battle, known to history as berserkers. He was accompanied in this pantheon by an assortment of other gods such as Thor, Loki, Freya, and Baldur, who represented various aspects of the forces of nature and the human psyche. As with all pagan religious belief systems, the Germanic religion had, broadly speaking, the same elements. Primarily a priestly caste, who through the use of intoxicating drugs were in communication with familiar spirits. These priests or priestesses in turn expressed the will of these so-called gods to the tribe, giving effect to the will of the demons. This will being invariably expressed in the form of some system of human and animal sacrifice with its accompanying degradations. This was in turn topped off by a policy of extreme tribalism, ensuring the constant production of misery and death through the use of war. If we are to believe the writings of the ancient Roman historian Tacitus and others, it would seem that the reign of Lucifer through his spiritual creation, Wotan, was particularly severe on the German tribes. He afflicted them mercilessly. They are described as living in a state of utter degradation and savagery unparalleled even for those pagan times. They had developed no cities, nor were there any of the accompanying conveniences of civilization to speak of. They were kept in a constant state of warfare both against their own neighboring tribes and other nations. They enjoyed a rather mean existence. They lived in a constant state of barbarism where war and death were the only thing to be prized. Their only meagre hope being that of an afterlife, where the noble warriors that fell in battle would spend an eternity feasting in the evenings in the great hall of Valhalla, and fighting during the daytime until the inevitable twilight of the gods arrived. This is when everything and everyone, including Wotan himself, would be destroyed. Then it would start all over again in an eternal cycle of war and death. Rather depressing stuff. In this sea of darkness and chaos, however, God reserved one nation that would be ruled by himself, a nation in which his laws would dominate and through which he would provide a light to the nations that were enshrouded in demonic darkness. That nation was Israel. To the great fortune of the Germans and of humanity as a whole, God the Creator, with a view to redeeming a captured humanity, and in the ultimate expression of his love towards the whole world, became a man. The man, Jesus Christ. As a man he lived a sinless life and afterwards allowed himself to be crucified by the demonic powers ruling the earth. In the process, he being the creator of all life, whose own life is worth more than those who ever have or shall live, atoned for the sins of mankind, and in so doing reclaimed the right of man to retake dominion of the earth from the evil one. During his life on earth, both before and after his resurrection from the dead, he proclaimed the gospel or good news of the kingdom of God. And this is the gospel. The kingdom of darkness is defeated, and Christ's kingdom, the kingdom of God, will be established on the earth. This will be the perfect kingdom lasting 1,000 years, where the earth will be restored, peace and justice will reign, and mankind will reach its full potential. Over the course of time since his earthly appearance, Christ is in the process of recruiting humans to serve as kings and priests with him in this coming kingdom. They will be part of the first resurrection of mankind that will take place on his return to earth. During this period, called the millennial reign, the devil and his angels will be imprisoned, thereby allowing mankind to thrive without his ever-present evil influence. When the 1,000 years are finished, Satan will be let loose for a short time for a final temptation of humanity. Then he and his angels will be defeated and destroyed. All humans that were not part of the first resurrection, even those who had never even heard of the name of Christ during their lifetime, will be brought back to life and given the opportunity, free from the influence of Satan and his angels, to choose the gift of salvation. Those who are judged wicked and unrepentant will be mercifully destroyed in the lake of fire that had been prepared for the devil and his angels. In summary, the kingdom of darkness has lost its legitimacy as the legal ruler of the earth. All power in heaven and earth has been transferred to Jesus Christ. Satan and his minions have now been exposed. They are on borrowed time, and they know it. It has therefore been an imperative of the kingdom of darkness to limit the spread and the knowledge of this good news throughout the earth. Retaining their influence and control over all the nations of the earth is paramount for Satan and his legions.